there are always lessons. There are always, you try to anticipate everything, but it's better to set up the expectation of yourself that there will be something will pop up, right? And I have to say, I think you're actually very on top of the detail, the two of you. You've been always thinking about the next thing we need to talk about. You're always ruminating on it on our group chat. We're going, cool, okay, so we had this initial value from the valuer, didn't quite meet what we wanted. How do we give more info? Like, you're still always always moving forward with it. Like, how do we, and that's basically the whole thing. It's kind of a moving feast. You sort of think you have the static project, but it's really not, whether it's the renovation, the people involved, the tenanting, and then getting it back into that long-term rental status. It's like a river, and you have to go with it. Because if you jump out, you get none of that benefit, right? But you have to be open to rolling with the punches. You've done that super well.
Welcome to Checks and Balances, brought to you by Partners Life. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And today, we've got Ilse Wolfe, James and Mike's personal property coach, back on the podcast to talk about why James and Mike bought 12 units in Upper Hutt.
We're back in your life for part 2 with Ilse. So in part 1, Ilse, we went through the deal. We nearly backed away from the deal, but we have committed to 12 units in Upper Hutt. They're not in great state. Mike's never been south of the Bombays in his life.
Couldn't point it out on a map if I tried.
Except for the Jaffa trip to Queenstown.
And Pawanui.
There you go.
Reinforcing
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, reinforcing
Just
stereotype.
Auckland, Pawanui, Queenstown.
Yeah, there you go. But we did pull the trigger on the deal. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what the plan was for the renovations, the lending, because Mike promised me some money to pay for all of this. So we worked that out. What went well.
His voice almost broke then. We did work it out.
Yeah. And what has not gone so well, because we're still in the middle of all the renovations as well. So Ilse, let's start. We have committed to these properties. What's the plan?
A literal conversation. What do we do now? Yeah.
So in summary, for your first multi-unit project, you've bought 12 houses on 12 awesome titles, slabs of dirt in Upper Hutt, and and we're super excited about it.
Yeah.
Now we're staring down the lens of 12 renovations in a very hasty timeline, about 10 or so weeks, ideally, and taking you on that roller coaster.
Yeah, I remember when we were going to talk about when we were down in Wellington and we're sitting on the floor of one of these 1-bedroom units and they're not in great shape. And Mike and I have been mates for like well over 10 years. I look at Mike and I go, you know what, Mike? If you said to me, you and I'd be sitting on the floor of a 1-bedroom unit up in Upper Hutt, I go, didn't work out well, eh? So the units did need some love. So tell us, what was the renovation plan?
Cool. All right. So the scope, which we did mention in the last episode, did change, right? So I think you got excited by not only the cash flow, but the value add. So just to give a point of reference as well, the rents that you picked the property up for ranged between $200 and $260 roughly, right? So on
Pretty
average,
much,
about $250 per week per each of these 1-bedroom units, which is one of the awesome alarm bells I see and go, oh, that's a great starting point, because one of the levers we want is to add a ton of massively increase those rents. So we had a plan and we had post-renovation appraisals during your due diligence, right, to get those up to around 450, 470. So we know that's the benchmark. But on top of that, when you saw how much equity was there to be had, as well as increase the rents, started to think about how do we do the renovation really, really well, very thoroughly. So where we've got to is we're doing complete repaint inside. In fact, we had a really awesome podcast fan who drove from Martinborough to pitch for that, right? So we've got this really super keen, awesome pricing for the paint. We've got the flooring sorted, complete replacement of the kitchen, which wasn't part of the original plan, but is a cost-effective way to massively turn a very tired house into basically a new build. Really just tickle up the bathrooms, like new fittings, and there was some old Ducks Quest piping that needed to be removed. For those of you who have not heard of that, that's expired product from the 70s and 80s and it has no place being in a house these days. And I think what is is unique to this project, because often our multi-unit projects do not include this in the scope. You've also squeezed into what is still a very cost-efficient budget, complete repaint of all 6 exteriors. So each of the 6 buildings that are duplexes to get to 12, completely repainting those, and that does a massive job for the value add. So we've kind of taken a base plan and we've really supercharged it by jumping on a plane and getting down there and getting right into the weeds with this one.
A fiscally responsible plan, I might add.
Yeah.
So fiscally responsible, we cheated on our national carrier.
We're gonna get to it in a second. Just coming back to the painter, I must give a shout out to him. So
How good.
we go and we shake his hand. We go, "Nice to meet you," and he goes, "Lads, so nice to meet the Property Academy podcast boys in person."
Yeah.
And I was just, Mike and I just
we
go,
were throwing. I was
Mike
like,
and I go, he goes, "Kidding," and I'm like, "What an inside reference!"
That was so good.
Big shout out to Jonty.
Yeah,
So
legend.
so Ilse's come up with
Just quickly, I paid one of his invoices on Friday, and I put the reference as like the name of the property, and then like OP's podcast straight after.
It was the longest moment of silence.
Oh, it was
when they
so much fun. Yeah.
did feel like an eternity. And, Mike and I aren't precious at all, clearly. Okay, so pretty much we're doing bathrooms, we're doing kitchens, carpet, vinyl, repaint, the whole shebang. All of these things I know nothing about how to do because these are supple finance hands. Now, so we've got a plan. Mike, your job is to find the money.
Yeah.
And Mike's whole thing the whole time is like, "Don't worry, James, I got this sorted." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So Mike, how did we get the money?
Yeah. So I guess where we should sort of start with this is one of the reasons why this was so attractive, right, was because of the individual titles and the fact that means it should be a lot easier to get one of these multi-unit properties onto residential interest rates. Now, why would you want something on residential interest rates as opposed to commercial interest rates? Residential interest rates, we all know, right? 6.5% at the moment, high sixes, somewhere around there. A commercial interest rate is a little bit different. Cost of funds, and then you have like your risk margin, and then you have the bank's margin on top of that. So all in, your commercial interest rates at the moment, anywhere from high 7s to mid 9s. So that is a lot more interest cost that you are paying, which means that it makes the deal a lot less attractive from a cash flow perspective and potentially cash flow negative. So when we did the modeling for this, I did the finance modeling, I think 8.5%, 8.75%, and it was still cash flow positive. So in the back of my head, I knew, okay, worst case scenario, we're still going to be cash flow positive. I think right at the start, it might have been we had to tip in $800 a month each or something. It wasn't a huge amount. But I knew that we were going to be all right, even on commercial interest rates. So we took a pitch for the deal to a bank. We ended up going with Kiwi Bank for this one because they are really good at, they kind of specialize as well for things in the regions. They are a lot more flexible on. A lot of the banks for anything slightly not, your box standard residential, house, things in the regions, they find it a little bit more tricky to deal with. Kiwi Bank a little bit more flexible there. So we ended up going with Kiwi Bank for the pitch. Kiwi Bank said, yep, we like the idea of this. They kind of looked at us as well, like, are you sure these numbers stack up? And so we thought, cool. So what we do then is we got all the property documents, all of the information for the buyers. We spun up a company. And then we...
Is it called Upper Hutt?
Should we talk about the name of the company, Michael?
No, let's not talk about the name of the company. We spun up the company, packaged all that up, and got it off to the bank. Now, at this point in time, we had already gone unconditional on the property, all right? So we actually had to buy this property one way or another. But, I was pretty confident that we'd be able to do it. So yeah, we managed to get the purchase sorted and the kind of rough numbers for the construction. So when you are pitching one of these deals, there are 2 parts to the application. There's the initial purchase, which is we are purchasing a property for 2.4 million. Here is the current value of the property right now based on the registered valuation. We are then going to spend X amount of money, and this is going to be the value in the future and the rent return in the future, right? So the bank kind of look at that and go, yep, okay, seems too good to be true, but tell us more. So we put all that together. They approved the purchase. We got that done. We got that settled. And then after that, we moved on to the construction piece of the finance.
Yeah, and we both had to find, so QBank gave us 70% of the money, and then 30% we had to borrow against our own homes to be able to tip in. Mike, this is probably like, much more complex lending, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for those that are listening, thinking about being able to do a deal like this, it's pretty important they get in front of the right mortgage broker.
Yeah, it is. And I would say that if you're talking to a mortgage broker or any professional really, and they say, here's the fee to do the work, and you go, nah, I don't want to pay that. Some guy down the road reckons he'll do it for free. I can almost guarantee you they either do not know what they're talking about or they have never done it before. They might be a great mortgage broker, but they don't know the amount of work that is required for these deals. Someone saying to you, if you said to me, oh, Mike, I want to get a multi and it's 8 units, it's this, go get me a pre-approval. If your broker says to you, yeah, I'll go get you a pre-approval, I can almost guarantee they've never done it before.
Or it'll be commercial lending, right?
Yeah.
It'll break the deal. And then you think, oh, that's no longer a great deal, but it came down to that broker taking the wrong approach.
Yeah.
Why do you say if they just go off and get you a pre-approval? Because like say if you're buying a home, it's very common to get a pre-approval. Why is this different?
Yeah, so buying a house, a residential house in New Zealand is, for a bank, almost risk-free if you have 30% or 20% deposit. There is almost no risk in it for the bank, right? So you can go to the bank and say, hey, I want to buy a house for this much money, this much deposit in roughly this area. And they go, yeah, there's not really a lot of risk here. So here's a ticket to ride. Go find me a house. That is not how a commercial property purchase works. You cannot go to the bank and go, hey, I want a pre-approval for a commercial property. And these are effectively, a bank will look at it as a commercial property. Yep, I'm talking about residential interest rates. And most of the time, they're still viewed as a commercial property. A banker just can't do that. Because when people ask me for it, I go, well, how long is a piece of string, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are the costs associated with the property? A commercial property in Upper Hutt, one commercial property in Upper Hutt versus another commercial property in Upper Hutt, the cost might be completely different. The insurance might be completely different. The rates might be completely different. Might be a specialist property, at which point I go, oh, what used to be a gas station, it's super cheap. Surely it's a good deal. No, because the mortgagee and the owner have all of the responsibilities for the environmental impacts that cause from leakage, right? So like, it's so much more complex than just here's a house.
Yeah. And Ilse, I'm guessing with your deals when you're working with clients, so I know you work with AJ from Lighthouse with a lot of your deals, but I'm guessing there are other mortgage brokers who get involved, and I'm sure sometimes they can almost get in the way of the deal if they don't know what they're doing.
I almost pre-vet the broker involved. So when someone comes to inquire about boardroom, that is definitely on my list of questions, and there are a handful that get it right consistently to successfully get the lending. I will always try and point if they're not with that small handful, and it is a short list, to make sure that they get it, like they have to get it, because that having the right people on the team for a deal like this is just so important. And also because, as you've seen, how involved the due diligence is. It's not a 3-bed, 1-bath house. And that's what you have to assess. That is what the team you're working with needs to be able to successfully assess. And then you can also see with the bank, right? Like, all of this work that you as the current buyer is going through is the same for if they ever had to liquidate and access their cash, right? So that's in the back of their mind as well. So it's very involved in there. No two are the same.
Probably quite similar to, when you go see a lawyer who did your property, and you want to get a relationship agreement, and you're like, these are completely different skill sets, got to go the right person for the right thing. Let's move on. So we've got the renovation plan, we've got some money, thank goodness. We then jump on a plane to Wellington, and we want to be financially responsible. So we jump on a plane down to take a Jetstar flight down to Wellington, and it's the three of us and Georgia, who is in our marketing team, and she's got a tripod filming the whole thing. But we nearly missed the flight.
I mean, it's one of the worst flights. I had some client entertainment the previous evening.
Whatever the hell that means.
And it was not a great flight for Mike. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
And we had Matt. So we had several.
I forgot Matt was there.
Yeah.
We had several of us at different points realizing we hadn't checked in.
Yeah.
Like, to varying degrees. Like, oh my gosh, we barely got on the plane.
I will add though, Mike had checked in Mike had just checked out mentally that morning, so was just sitting there watching the chaos unfold around me, just be like, please just get me on the plane.
Yeah,
Wait,
Mike is so checked out. He's talking in the third person. Also, you and I were sitting there having a coffee, and then for some point we talked about checking in for the flight, and then you were like, "Oh, do I need to?" And then we both looked at each other, got up, and ran to Jetstar. And I reckon we made it with about 30 seconds.
100%. If the woman hadn't called me up and said, anyone here for Wellington? This was straight after I was mocking Matt because he was stuck in the check-in line for half an hour.
And Georgia, we'd adjusted the flight, added luggage, withdrawn luggage. I think they just withdrew a ticket.
Yeah.
They were like,
then-
not too many interactions.
And then she got, is it airdrop when on the plane people can send explicit photos? I mean, that would not happen on any New Zealand flight.
I missed that because I was asleep.
Yeah.
She was working on her laptop preparing.
forgot about that.
Yeah. So just people can airdrop because you have no idea who it is on the plane.
Yeah.
She was getting quite explicit photographs.
Yeah. Anywho, so the purpose of Ilse, you were the one that goes, hey, you guys actually need to go and look at these properties in person. Tell us, apart from having a little bit of fun, going out for dinner, what was the purpose of the trip?
So I don't know about Mike, but I had a very clear goal for the trip. So basically, all hands on deck. We needed to get to site. We all needed to see this property because up until this point, we'd had video calls with our power team on the ground, which does a good chunk of the job, but we needed to still select the final team, right? So always good to have at least 2 horses in the race, whether it be the builder, the electrician, Usually you get the electrician or sparky and plumber come with the builder. The other person that I like to specifically select is the plasterer painter, because for me, what I notice with price of labour hiking up, that is by far the one job that is the most variable in pricing. So the same scope, you give the exact same brief to 5 painters, you will get, they literally could be tens of thousands of dollars apart. And then you want to talk with each of them on site and hear their approach, because you might have, in the context of painting again, you might have 2 painters. Well, if you have 2 painters painting 6 A-frames for how long, that would take forever. I want to know that someone's going to throw a huge team of guys who can smash it out in a couple of days or a week or 2 at best. So we need to get on ground, have those conversations, set expectations directly with those people and choose. And also because it's 12 units, right? 12 mistakes, a mistake times 12 or something missed times 12 is extremely expensive compared to when you might have a 3-bed, 1-bath house with 1 rotting shower when you rip it out. You expect that. But if there's something you don't expect times 12, that's a heck of a lot of cash. So we're going all in full comprehensive reno, as we said. So flooring, paint, full exterior paint. And so because we knew that we wanted to add value to the outside, we really had to keep those dollars in control. So I guess that initial plan I mentioned in the last episode was $20,000 per unit was our kind of nice spend. I think we've achieved an extremely cost-efficient pricing of around $30,000 per unit. And that's everything. Like, it's completely new, right? You've addressed all the deferred maintenance. We've got rid of that old Duck's Quest. And outside and in, everything is new. So it's going to be like brand new. Basically look like a new build, rent like a new build price.
Yeah. One thing I learned when I was down in Wellington was I'm really in more of like I should be here and I'm a cheerleader type position, because as soon as Ilse started talking to the builders and started talking to the painters, I was like, oh, I have no value I can add here whatsoever, because we're so lucky that we had you running this whole thing. Very safe to say we wouldn't have done this at all without your help.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
I think one of the other reasons why I found it really helpful to go down there and see the property was actually to meet the tradies, like meet the team, because we're in Auckland, they're in Upper Hutt. You're doing things by text, over the phone, trying to just manage the relationship and manage the work and keep things ticking over. And when you've met someone face to face and you get their sense of humor and you've landed a couple of jokes, it makes the whole thing a little bit easier, especially because it's a stressful thing trying to coordinate, 15 to 20 tradespeople on a work site, and we're in Auckland and they're down there. It can get a little bit stressful. So I found that really helpful.
Yeah, that's good. And setting the expectations, the detail of finish with that trade team, right? Because it's so easy for misinterpretation, right? Of things that are so variable, but also to talk about pricing and understand it in a really detailed level as well is just so important. And one of the benefits, of course, of buying 12 vanities is you're going to get a good wholesale rate. So it's not 12 retail units. And we're very, I think we're very lucky that working with a builder who he has literally broken down, which I don't normally see, but he's been so great with his communication. It's like per scope of install vanity, install shower box, including his margin. He's been so transparent. And when I look at those individual prices, I still am sort of shocked because I think that's barely over the price of a retail of that unit, and that's completed. So we've got full expectations. We've got, full expectation of a fixed spend, but also with a contingency of, some other things happen. Like I think the heat pumps basically found, okay, that's the thing that's popped up, right? And you don't know everything until you get into it. So you still need to allow for that. But apart from that, the scope that is agreed is fixed pricing, and that helps you manage that risk, especially from afar.
Yeah, and in terms of your fee, Ilse, to kind of manage all this and take people through it, like I'm watching you kind of negotiate with these individual tradespeople and understanding the pricing, and we would have paid like such a high multiple on your services just because we would have no idea to go, let's pay for this in bulk up front, or this is actually out of the market, or we can't be bothered getting full quotes from a painter. Or
Right. Or to know how to challenge the quote, right? Sorry, like to actually understand if this is a fair quote or not is also a question.
That's what this is literally what I was about to say. We were on a call saying, you're like, nah, that doesn't seem right. And James and I are like, yeah, no, it doesn't. Yeah, no.
Absolutely.
Yeah, oh my God. I was
How dare they?
Oh, yeah.
How dare you do that to the Opez boys? Okay, so we've agreed on we found our team, right? We've got our power team on site. We've got a plan. We've got 2 empty units that we're going to start to renovate, and then pretty much we just get to work, right?
Yeah. So what happened was we settled on a Monday. So that is when we have exchanged money for titles, for undertakings, for whatever, and we own the property. Tuesday morning, work started.
How is that common? Because that was one of the things I was really surprised by.
Yeah.
Under my watch, absolutely.
It was just like I had them there at midnight.
Yeah.
I laugh, but definitely. So that is what we were. This is what we were planning in the DD, right? And part of selecting the right team is knowing it's not just the scope and how much they'll charge, but it's the time management. So definitely setting a timeline, and you're always working with different conditions. So it's definitely best way to settle is vacant possession when you've got a small number of units or a standalone house, because you've got no sort of inherited tenant that you don't have a personal relationship with and need to manage out. But in the case of 12, it's actually not great to have vacant possession because that's zero cash flow unless you can completely hold all that cost. I tend to find a rolling notice is far more acceptable because you're managing the tenants moving out, which is reducing your cash flow. You need to renovate, but at the same time, in parallel, which I'm sure we'll talk about, is needing to select the future tenant or tenants, right? And there's a lot of work that needs to happen in that. So having a completely vacant property has its challenges, but for this one, it was great. 2 were already vacant, and that actually is, it's not the test, we know the scope, but it's a good way to test the timeline and then basically showcase it or create a viewing for it.
So James, before we continue, I have got a special announcement.
Have you started sticking to your budget?
Absolutely not.
You finally made it as an after hours DJ.
I wish. Mate, the thing is, we have got a brand new podcast partner, Partners Life.
You mean the award-winning insurance provider with over 300,000 Kiwis insured?
Yep, they're also a New Zealand operated company, and they are passionate about increasing financial literacy amongst Kiwis.
Sounds like a great match. Where can I learn more about them?
Check out their website in our show notes below.
Really thought DJ Magic Mike was going to be a global sensation for a second. So we're going to talk about the whole tenancy piece in another episode because there's quite a bit there as well. But you're right. So we had 2 of the 12 were empty units. So we were like, let's knock through these units. And then coming back to the how can we do things as cost efficiently as possible, there was some works that needed to be done on the exterior. We needed to paint all of the units. And as of this episode going out, those units are all done. They're, the exterior work is done. They're painted. They're looking beautiful.
Have you seen a photo? Because we've changed this color scheme midway, which I loved.
Can we talk about the color scheme?
Definitely
That was awesome. Yeah.
Honestly, when someone comes up from the power team with that initiative, I'm like, they're our people.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So like when we get asked questions going, because Mike and I are the decision makers in this, right? And they're like, guys, what colors do you want the houses to look like? And we're just like,
He says green and gold. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, that's
Yeah.
not.
yeah. I'm like, oh. And then, so Dave, the project manager / builder, he's great. He's sending us videos walking through the house. I think he's using us to kind of, jump into a career in media or something like that. He's then taking pictures and putting like writing meme style over the top of it. But he sent a picture to us of the units. He's like, lads, we painted some of them. They're too white. We think there should be some other colors. What other colors do you want? And Mike and I are like,
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
But it was funny because when we were talking to John the painter, he's like, you can have Piha Black Sands or like Pahudakawa. And I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Like, what?
yeah.
What?
You're like, is that-
Like, I
is
don't
that
know,
black?
man.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know, man.
Yeah. And then just to troll us, he was like, oh, we can do flamingo pink.
Yeah. Yeah. So we did change the color scheme halfway through, but you do when my vision for them, whatever that may be, was that they do. I wanted them to look quite nice from the outside, right? When you're
Yeah.
sitting there and you meet the tenants and you're talking to everyone.
You have like a vision of how it's going to turn up. And when you fly down next on Air New Zealand and and see them, it's so remarkable, like that satisfaction and that. Actually, I love how Jonty and Dave had the initiative and took that approach, because I remember, Dave, I think he feels like he needs to like check in with me on a few things as well. So he's like, I've made this decision, but the boys have signed it off, by the way, sort of thing. But he sends this image of the satellite view, 6 A-frames, and he's color coded them. He's going, these two here, these two, and he's randomized the color of these units. So it was really cool, because
cool.
I like that he stepped up, knowing that you're up here, they're down there, and they said, hey guys, we could do better.
And sometimes he sends us like a bunch of texts and then we don't respond. He's thinking like he's in trouble or we're angry or something. But we're just busy.
Yeah.
And we just have it.
And
have
the other thing is, because there's two of us that could respond, we both read it and go, he'll respond.
Yeah. It's amazing. So these 2 units are done. We've got tenants in the rest of the units. We need to kind of continue to do those renovations, which we'll talk about in another episode. Should we move on to what's maybe not gone so well so far, or the things that have
The surprises.
surprises? I think the first one would be talking about the titles.
Yeah. So having 12 titles for one block of land, basically what it is not a normal thing. It's quite unique. It's not complex. It's just not normal. But the law firm we were using actually made a mistake when they were registering our ownership over those titles. And instead of doing what the bank asked and requesting an individual mortgage over each separate title, so 12 pieces of land, 12 mortgages, which is the ability for the bank to come and take their money back on each one of those titles, right? Instead of the bank taking 12 individual mortgages over those each individual title, they put one blanket mortgage over all of those titles. Now, that still, it's okay, but it's not exact. And when you're dealing with a bank and they're lending these sums of money against the property, a mistake like that is no, right? The money stops and we have to fix that before anything else can happen. Now, normally, if we were just buying a property and just holding it as a rental and not doing the renovation piece, that wouldn't be an issue, because we would just fix that over a couple of weeks and it would all be fine. However, we needed the cash from the construction portion of the lending that was approved to pay the tradies. Now, you'll remember that I said we settled on Monday and the tradies started on Tuesday. I then send the first lot of invoices, maybe 7 days later, to the bank and say, hey guys, can we pay these please? They go, yep, let me have a look at this. No, we can't pay these because the mortgage isn't set up correctly. We're not going to give you any more money because we're worried we couldn't get it back if we needed to. So our law firm had to then fix that issue, which was quite frustrating.
How long does it take to fix that?
Was it 2 weeks?
No. So it was from the time we found it and it was kind of brought to the attention of everyone. it was rectified in say 3 or 4 days. However,
Felt like 2 weeks.
the
Yeah,
issue
felt like 2.
well, it felt like 2 weeks because you've got a team of tradespeople who have been working under kind of the goodwill, that they will get paid when they send an invoice. Construction as an industry is notorious for people doing work and not getting paid, right?
Yeah.
Like whether they go under, whether they just don't get paid sometimes, and you always see sometimes a trader gets so frustrated they go rip out everything they've done, right? So you can see why they're on edge about it. We're two blokes in Auckland that they've never really met. They've done all this work in Upper Hutt, so I can see the frustration bit. But it took about 4 or 5 days to rectify the issue, and that's 4 or 5 days of us trying to manage the expectations of everyone we've promised payment to, while keeping the work going. They're still spending more money. They're still buying stuff and sending their teams there. So that was pretty stressful, and caused quite a crunch.
It was a few dominoes off the back of it as well. So like one piece was Dave wasn't in any particular, like he's like, I trust you guys. Never met us before, but he trusts us. Seemed like apparently we're trustworthy people in terms of getting paid. So he wasn't any particular, like he wasn't like sending invoices straight away. He was like, I'll get this through. You guys will sort it out. And then off the back of it, we had an end date where we needed the units finished to then move on to the next units, get people in to start viewing, the tenancy to start getting the cash flow rolling in. As a whole bunch of different implications. You've then got Dave as the project manager who's essentially responsible for everybody else getting paid through us. So he's getting hit up from lots of other ways. We've got the kitchens that we're buying in bulk at a certain price and agreeing to pay for it at a certain price and then going like, what is happening here? So what ended up happening was Mike and I had to tip in the money ourselves to pay it. And then Mike, I think you got it in writing from the bank going, if we do this, making sure we'll get the money back at the end of it, right?
Yeah, and that's just probably an experience thing on my behalf that, banks will say, when you're dealing with these situations, you just want to make sure it's in writing. If I do X, if James and I tip in 50 grand each, because that's what it was, to pay the initial invoice, that you aren't going to say to me, oh, yep, thanks guys, we've sorted the title issue, we got the build contract through, and you know what? Yeah, we're still happy with the original amount and you guys can cover the first 100. And a bank will do that. A bank will absolutely do that, right? So you just need to make sure, and this is down to your broker more than you, because your broker should know this, should have the experience. You do not take a phone call as, yep, no worries, we'll get it done, as gospel. When you were talking these things with the bank, you have to get it in writing.
Especially because we know that the renovation costs we said to the bank versus we knew it's actually going to be more. So we didn't want to, so the title thing happened, then we're going to hit them back for more money. They're going like, what's going on here? So that's why getting that in writing was so important, because we knew we would need more money from the bank at the end of this. The other component that kind of added to this as well, so our builder, we were like, hey, we really need to get what's the right term?
A contract with a schedule of payments. So a construction loan is different from just here's a sum of money and you guys go manage the renovations and don't blow the costs out. All right, guys, we'll see you later. You might get that to 80 grand, 100 grand, 120 if you know what you're doing, depending on your experience. But that is just the bank giving you the money and you sort it out. For a project of this size and 12 units, a bank is naturally a little bit more risk averse around going, oh, you two idiots seem like you know what you're doing. Here's 360 grand, you go figure it out, right? No, a bank is going to want to know what work is happening, in what order, on what date, and for how much. And the reason they do that, like everything with a bank, is that they've been burnt before, right? Because they've been around since the dawn of time. So if something is starting to go out of kilter at the first payment and then the second payment, let's say the first payment for the painting outside was quoted as 35 grand and it comes in at 42 grand. The bank will turn around and go, talk to me about that. What happened? Why has it come in over? And it's because you got to remember, if everything comes in 10% over budget, that's another 36 grand that the bank has to find to get this thing finished at the end, or you have to tip in. So they are very particular about that schedule of payments and what's going on for good reason.
So we said to Dave, hey, we need this schedule of payments. And Dave being a builder, he's not focused on being behind a keyboard, writing us a contract, which Ilse, I'm sure you can talk to in a second. He's going, these lads need some work done by a date. I'm going to focus on the people, getting everything done. And we were like, Dave, we need this contract because it's going to take us a while to get the construction loan drawn down to get it paid to you. In hindsight, I think we probably could have been a little bit more with Dave. Dave, this is really important. This is how long it's going to, that's probably one of the learnings that I took away from this was going, because that was the other implication is he sent us a contract. And then I think he also had a different date on when he wanted to get paid. And the bank came back to us and was like, why are you rushing me to get this paid? So it was that plus what happened with the solicitors and the titles. That was probably the thing that's been the most stressful so far.
I would say the learning for that, for us, is probably when you are communicating something that is, a hard stop or is like, really, this is important, you have to say to someone, this is important. Because you got to remember on these calls, Dave, James, and I are talking about 4,000 different things. And then I'm going, and the contract. You know what I mean? And like, we probably should be like, this is paramount. Like this is actually something that could, throw a spanner in the whole works here.
He's thinking about the paint. It's too white, guys. Yeah. We need a grey in here.
But it's not Dave specifically. This is just when you're managing contractors in general, I think it's really important to make sure those points are ticked off. And when you are going through this, if you are going to do one of these, you have to make sure that you are really clear with the timelines from the bank. So if the bank say, like if you start thinking, I just send this invoice over and they just put the money in the account. No, anytime you're dealing with a bank, if you think it's going to be a 24-hour turnaround time, double it. Because they will have a question. You'll have to go back and then it'll take a while. And then, it's a bit late in the day, so we'll draw it down tomorrow. Because for a bank, it's not the end of the world. For you, you're trying to manage expectations for a few people. Yeah.
And that's the dynamic, right? So with a renovation, you're in the center managing all those different stakeholders. So you've got the physical team on site, you've got the legal team, the bank, and everyone just is only thinking about their portion, right? They're like, I need this. And you're in the middle going, juggling all these balls. I have to say that's a new drawdown for finance method, like construction finance. And because if I've got this right, this is you saying, hey, we've got valuation, this is going to value up. And so we're drawing some of that future equity down, right? So that's why they're going, cool, make sure that you're keeping in check, because every time we give you extra money, it's removing from our net position as the security owner, right?
Yep.
That's what the bank's thinking. The other way, which is most common, and I'm actually trying to think, but I think all of the other boardroom members so far have drawn down for their renovation based on the usable equity within one of their own properties. So usually that they get to draw down, there's no real question about it. The deposit for the purchase and the reno fund is usually in the previous property that they already own.
Yeah, very, very different risk position for the bank.
Yeah.
If you've got owner-occupied standalone resi house that's got a ton of equity in it, again, almost risk-free for a bank, they're going to go, yep, no worries, we'll give you that pot of money and we'll do that. To Ilse's point, every time we are drawing down funds based on the future value of the property, so the bank is staring at everything a lot more closely to make sure we're not eating their margin.
Yeah. The other thing I'm keen to know, Ilse, is because obviously we also do like weekly calls with you, right? With a team where everybody is talking about their own deals within the boardroom. One thing that I've been wondering, and I've been messaging Mike about, is whether we went overboard with our renovations. Because I know one of the things has been like, what impacts the tenant that will get them to pay more rent? And like, say I've been wondering with the external painting going, did we overcook the external painting? Do you think there's anything we've done which we've spent too much money on?
Or second guessing decisions. Absolutely not. Specific, was that the right answer?
No, if there is,
no. It's like,
yeah. Truthfully, no, you haven't. So we're doing it because it needed to be done. It's three big things in a build report when you are looking to buy a property. So the roof structure, which is holding all the weather off, the weather tightness of the cladding, and then the piles. Those three fundamentals need to be in great condition. So often these build reports come in like a traffic light system. I don't mind seeing greens and oranges because when you buy an existing build, you're expecting that. It's appropriate for the age of the property, which would be different from a new build, right? You'd want greens all day, every day. If you see a red on those 3 items, that's a major. Doesn't mean you wouldn't buy, but we need to put some focus here, and there's some work that has to be done equals some money to spend. You definitely didn't have a red light, but there was wear and tear coming through on that cladding. And that's because of neglect of a very disconnected previous owner, right? And one of the opportunities for getting such a great price is that was a family feud. There were siblings who owned that property, clearly out of touch with each other, couldn't even communicate except through a lawyer. So how's the condition of the property that they mutually own, right? So the great thing is you've addressed all the weather tightness. You won't even need to touch the outside of these properties for decades, right? Because you've actually covered everything comprehensively in this job. And I think the approach here is do it really well, do it once. The great thing is you have aluminium windows, I mentioned, so there's no maintenance, and those can be a pain. But you've kind of taken it from top to bottom. So there's kind of a balance of when you are deciding on any item within the renovation, like, do I do it for this reason or this? Often it can be for the rent. So a lot of the interior, which a tenant cares about, right, is to get the rent appeal and therefore the cash flow up. That helps your cash flow and return. Often on the exterior, those are nice to have. Like a tenant does not care whether you change the roof, right? They really don't care. But that decision would be made on more a value add point of view for the value, not for the tenant appeal, and also for the weather tightness.
Say, for example, like one thing I've been wondering about is, the landscaping of the property. Like there's really nothing there. So we've like tidied up the sections, we've water blasted everything, but then I've been going like, should we like bark some stuff and do some flaxes and those sort of things? In terms of the rent or the valuation, do they care about those at all?
Landscaping will have a value add onto the improvements part of the valuation. So you've got capital. Oh, what's it called? Yes, you've got the land, and then you have improvements. So everything we're doing is adding to the improvements value. So when you increase the appeal, the value per square meter from those improvements increases. If it's the primary dwellings that people will live in, you get the best uplift on that spend. Landscaping to a lesser extent, but you have added value. So what I love is that we're not even considering that as part of the scope for this round of renovations, but it is another way that you really can add value in future if you wanted to do another loop. So I would think things like creating some private areas around, because the beauty is off all of these lounges, you have a ranch slider, concrete patio, such a bright, low maintenance grassy section. But you could start to build up the landscaping to privatize each of those units. So some screens to create privacy, maybe a little box garden, or even fencing to create more of a self-contained area. And because you own all 12, right, that might not be so easily done if you happened to own 4 of the 12. All of your other neighbors would have an opinion about it. So you could come up with a really gorgeous design that will be consistent and that will overall enhance the street appeal.
All right, so I did stuff up, guys. I bought 12 units in Upper Hutt without telling my wife. Did you know about this, Ilse?
No.
Okay.
Don't tell her I'm involved.
So I look back at it in hindsight and I go,
oh, this is good.
So Hannah and I I'm very focused on the finances. Hannah's kind of just like, as long as we got the stuff we need and we can do all the family stuff, she's like pretty happy. She's probably quite a lot more risk adverse than I am. So I was conscious that if I said we were buying 12 units in Upper Hutt, she would be like, James, how are we going to pay for any of this? And I'll be like, Michael told me it'd be fine. And she's known Michael long enough to know, that's a 30% probability at best. So she said, so I said to her, hey, we're looking at doing this. This is something that might be interesting. And
We're gone unconditional.
Yeah. And she's like, absolutely not. We're not doing that. And I was like, well, I think, it's going to add this value, going to put us in a better position, blah, 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 blah. She was like, she's like, we've got all this other stuff going on, blah, blah, blah. And I go, okay, cool. And then I go, hey, just to let you know, we've got a valuation on the property. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, it's just going to cost like a couple of $1,000s just to see if it's like worth doing, blah, blah, blah. Now, Ilse, you tell me if I'm a bad guy. Me saying we've done a valuation means we've conditionally bought the property. Now, she took that as
You
we're
listened to nothing I said
interested-
last conversation.
yeah, we're interested in purchasing the property, doing the valuation. And anyway, so I said, we're doing the valuation. She was annoyed enough at me that we're going to spend a couple grand on a valuation for this place. And then I was like, cool. So this looks good enough. We're doing it. And she was like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, we're like 2 days away from going unconditional. So this is happening. And look, for those that have spouses out there or partners, I would not recommend doing what I did because what do you reckon, Mike? It was about a week in the dog box.
Yeah, I thought you were going to move into my joint for a little
Yeah.
bit there, actually.
Yeah, she was not happy with me. And in hindsight, I completely understand. I was definitely a dick about this whole thing where I was like, I want this thing. We're going to do this thing. I can see this will be good for us. So I'm just going to like bulldoze through it. But I should have definitely taken her on the journey of this is the risk. This is how we're going to mitigate this. This is why this thing is a good thing. So I am very sorry, Han, that I did not do
It's so much easier for me. I didn't have to consult with anyone.
Yeah.
I was like, Mike, does this sound like a good idea? Yeah,
except your life partner, me.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my
wow.
my other mistake. So anyway, that's probably what we've learned.
What if I can just sum all of this up kind of with the things that we've learned into some salient points here. James and I, great at talking, not great at communicating.
Mm.
If they are not the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing we've learned is neither of us are like project. So we got Dave, who's actually the project manager, but then somebody outside of that needs to show some level of interest of putting this into some sort of document and like managing it all.
I actually, a client of mine who was a long-term client, they're really cool. Husband and wife, they are project managers for like billion-dollar, projects and kind of infrastructure projects, and they do some property stuff like this, and my lord, are they efficient on it, right?
Yeah.
I look at something and I go, that's 3 months, and they go, no, Michael, watch this, and they do it, right? And the banks now have that relationship with them, and they're like, yep, cool, we don't need we'll just give you the money, a construction loan.
Yeah.
We'll just give you the money, you go do it. Now they've been working with me long enough probably to know that I'm not much of a project manager. And I kind of said, hey guys, like I've done this thing. Any tips for me? Like, managing this project. And he came back and was like, sorry, run that past me again. You're going to project manage a renovation of 12 units in Wellington from Auckland. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, lol.
I have to say, there are always lessons. There are always, you try to anticipate everything, but it's better to set up the expectation of yourself that there will be something will pop up, right? And I have to say, I think you're actually very on top of the detail, the two of you. You've been always thinking about the next thing we need to talk about. You're always ruminating on it on our group chat. We're going, cool, okay, so we had this initial value from the valuer, didn't quite meet what we wanted. How do we give more info? Like, you're still always always moving forward with it. Like, how do we, and that's basically the whole thing. It's kind of a moving feast. You sort of think you have the static project, but it's really not, whether it's the renovation, the people involved, the tenanting, and then getting it back into that long-term rental status. It's like a river, and you have to go with it. Because if you jump out, you get none of that benefit, right? But you have to be open to rolling with the punches.
Yeah.
You've done that super well.
And fitting it in our workday, like pretty much like from 8 till 6, Mike and I are doing like client meetings pretty much all day. So just finding time around everything else to make this work and response to Dave messages so he knows he's not angry. We're not angry with him.
And that's the thing, knowing how busy you two are. That's why I know I like rode that point so hard for a few days was, what's the communication you're getting from Dave? Are we on time? I don't want just the end date milestone. I want to know that he has milestones to commit to you so that you know there is no slip. We don't want budget slip. We don't want timeline slip. And then it's really cool to see how he's been pretty forthcoming with those very dizzying videos.
So we've got these 2 units that are now finished. The outsides are looking good. In the videos that we will do going forward, we're going to give you an update on the tenancy piece because there's quite a lot of work to do there. We're going to talk about how Mike and I are going to go do this again because we're already sending each other more deals of how we're going to find ourselves another multi. Ilse, you have been, and coming back to at the start of the previous podcast, where I was grilling you going, is this all legit? How does this all work? You've been amazing to deal with and very safe to say, Mike, we wouldn't have done any of this if it wasn't for Ilse.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So
Thank
thank you very
you.
much for like all the help that you've given us. If you are thinking about, like, there are different investment property strategies. There are those that are like just really time poor and want really easy, where like new build investment properties are there. And then we've got clients that do want to have a little bit more hands-on, want to add some value, want to see some positive cash flow, want to invest that time. I would definitely recommend reaching out to Ilse to have a chat about your situation and seeing what you can do.
Thank you. And I know it's been a ton of work for you, but do you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, that all this effort is why you'll get those amazing results? You know, if you do, you get, and then if you don't, you don't.
Look, Ilse, I don't know what else we could say as more of an endorsement than we're gonna do it again.
Yeah, I love it. We fly back and then I'm getting these messages. All I see is multis
Yeah,
everywhere I
just
drive.
see them everywhere. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, multis.
Yeah.
I want
Mike's
multis,
like,
multis.
we're gonna do 4 more before the end of the year, and I'm like, yeah, right, mate. Let's get number 1 done first. Cool. All right, so we'll wrap it up there. So make sure, if you are interested in this journey, that you subscribe to the channel, you give us a review, you give us a like. Reach out to Ilse if you're interested about looking at this strategy for yourself. Much love to Partners Life for sponsoring this episode, and we will catch you next time.
Cheers.
Thanks.